The night before my father's funeral, I was alone at my kitchen table at 1:52 in the morning, surrounded by printed programs I'd designed myself, a legal pad covered in vendor names, and a coffee that had gone cold 2 hours earlier. I was staring at the obituary proof one last time, making sure I'd spelled his army unit correctly. Probably no one else would notice, but he would have, and that felt like enough. What I didn't know that night, what I couldn't have imagined while I sat there in my apartment in Louisville, proofreading a dead man's life story, was that by the time his funeral reception ended the next day, I would find $14,800 missing from my savings account. And when I looked my mother in the eye and asked her why, she tilted her head with something close to pity and said, "You always told us money wasn't the most important thing to you. We just took you at your word." She wasn't wrong about what I'd said. She just forgot to mention she'd been listening for years, waiting for the right moment to use it. My father died on a Thursday morning in early April, a heart attack that came without warning. He was 63. He'd been talking about retiring in the fall. He had a fishing trip planned for June that he'd mentioned at least 4 times in the past year. The way he mentioned things he was genuinely excited about, casually, repeatedly, always with the same half smile. He never got to go. I was the one who took the call from the hospital. My mother was at her book club and couldn't be reached for 40 minutes. My sister Mia was in Denver, where she and her husband Nathan had moved 2 years earlier, and she burst into tears the moment I got her on the phone, which I understood, which I expected. Mia processes things loudly, it's just who she is. What happened next fell into a rhythm I'd spent my whole life practicing without realizing it. My mother sent a voice message to our family group chat the day after he died. She sounded exhausted, which she was, but the message was really a task list, delivered in that soft tone she used when she wanted something to sound like a request instead of a demand. "Gemma, since you know how to manage these things, can you take the lead on the arrangements? Mia and I need a little time to process." A pause, then, "You're so much better at all of this." That was it. No discussion, no "is this okay with you?" No acknowledgement that I might also need time to process the fact that my father was gone. I replied, "I can handle it." No one responded, the conversation moved on. Over the next 9 days, I coordinated with 3 different funeral homes before settling on one. I filed for 5 certified death certificates through the county clerk's office. I contacted the cemetery. I arranged the military honors because my father was a veteran, and I was not going to let that get overlooked. I reached out to his former co-workers. I designed the funeral program in Illustrator at 2 in the morning. I wrote the eulogy that I then handed to the pastor because my mother didn't want me to deliver it myself. "Too emotional," she said, though she didn't specify whose emotions she was protecting. I ordered the flowers, booked the caterer for the reception, printed the seating cards, and coordinated the hotel room block for out-of-town relatives. I also wired $14,800 into an account my mother called the estate expenses account, which she'd set up the week he died. She said it would be reimbursed from the estate once probate cleared. She sent me the routing and account numbers in a text message. I transferred the money from savings because that's what I had. I'd been careful with money my whole adult life, not because it was easy, but because I knew I didn't have a safety net the way some people do. That account was mine alone, built year by year doing freelance design work for companies that sometimes paid late and sometimes didn't pay at all. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself we were family. Mia flew in from Denver 2 days before the service. She and Nathan stayed at my mother's house. My mother picked them up from the airport. I know this because Mia posted a photo of the 3 of them at baggage claim, arms around each other, faces tired but together. I was at the florist finalizing the arrangement order when the photo appeared in my notifications. I'm not saying that to sound bitter. I'm saying it because I want you to understand what the shape of things looked like from where I was standing. The morning of the funeral, I arrived at the church an hour before anyone else. I set out the programs, 180 of them, cardstock, double-sided, my father's photo on the front in black and white because he looked like himself in black and white, not like a stranger filtered into warmth. I helped the florist position the arrangements. I confirmed with the caterer. I checked the sound system with the AV volunteer. I did all of this in the same dark grey dress I'd bought at Target 3 years ago, because I hadn't had time to shop for anything else. My mother arrived 40 minutes later, beautiful in a black dress I'd never seen before, her hair done. She walked in and looked around and said to no one in particular, "Everything looks just right." Then she found Mia and Nathan near the door, and the three of them stood together in a cluster of grief that I watched from across the narthex while I answered a text from the caterer about parking. During the service, the pastor read the eulogy I'd written. He didn't mention who wrote it. My mother and Mia sat in the front pew. There was a seat beside them. I sat in the second row. When the pastor invited family members to come forward and share a memory, he gestured toward the front pew. My mother spoke. Mia spoke and cried, and Nathan put his arm around her while people murmured sympathy. My name wasn't called. Afterward, several guests told my mother what a beautiful service it was. She thanked them graciously. One of my father's former colleagues, a man named Bill who'd known him for 20 years, said it was clear someone had put in extraordinary care. My mother touched her collarbone and said, "We all did what we could." I was refilling the coffee urn when that exchange happened. I heard it anyway. The reception was at the church hall, and it was, objectively, lovely. The flowers were right, the food was warm, the programs were on every table. I'd even printed a small photo display of my father, 20 images spanning 40 years, mounted on foam board, that people stopped at throughout the afternoon, touching the frames, laughing quietly at old pictures. My mother stood near it several times, receiving condolences. At one point she pointed to a photo from 1987 and said she remembered that day like it was yesterday. I had found that photo in a box in my parents' attic 3 weeks ago, on my hands and knees at 11 at night, because she'd asked me to pull together images, and I was the only one who'd gone looking. I don't know exactly what time it was when my phone buzzed. Somewhere around 2 in the afternoon, mid-reception, I was standing near the exit, half listening to a conversation between two aunts about flight times, when I felt the notification. I glanced down. Transfer confirmed. $3,200 to Judith K. Your available balance has been updated. I didn't move. I hadn't made a transfer. I hadn't touched my phone in over an hour. I slipped out the side door into the corridor. It was quiet there, just the hum of the HVAC and the distant sound of voices through the wall. I opened my banking app and looked at the transaction log. The transfer had gone through at 1:58 p.m. authorized, biometric confirmation, but the device name listed in the security log wasn't mine. iPad, Judith K. I read it twice. Then I took screenshots of everything, the transaction, the security log, the device entry, the timestamp. I forwarded them to my personal email with the subject line, "Save this." Then I stood in that hallway for about 90 seconds, breathing steadily, and tried to figure out what I actually knew. What I knew. My mother had accessed my bank account from her own device. At some point she'd obtained my login credentials. She had used them today, during my father's funeral reception, while I was standing 15 feet away refilling coffee. What I didn't know yet, how long this had been going on, or what else she'd taken. I went back inside. I smiled at the right moments. I accepted a long hug from my Aunt Gail, my father's older sister, who held me and whispered something about how much he loved me, which I filed away to feel later when I had room for it. I thanked people for coming. I did not look at my mother directly. It wasn't until the reception was winding down, guests trickling out, the caterers starting to consolidate dishes, that my phone rang with a number I almost didn't recognize. It was Mr. Prentice, the attorney who'd drawn up my father's will. He'd left a voicemail 2 days ago that I'd meant to return. I stepped out into the parking lot. He was apologetic about the timing. He said he'd been trying to reach me for several days. There was a matter with the will he needed to discuss before a family meeting that someone should have scheduled, but apparently no one had. I asked him what matter. He explained it carefully, the way attorneys explain things when they're trying not to alarm you. My father's original will, drafted 11 years ago, divided his estate equally between me and Mia. Standard split, no conditions, but 14 months ago he had come in to make an amendment. The new version still divided the estate, but the split was 70% to Mia, 30% to me. And my 30% was subject to a clause about demonstrated caregiver contributions and family responsibility. Language that Mr. Prentice said he'd flagged as unusual at the time. My father had been insistent on including it, or someone had been, and my father had signed, and Mr. Prentice had obliged. The clause could be interpreted in my favour, he said, or it could be used to argue I was entitled to nothing if someone wanted to push it that direction. I asked when exactly 14 months ago. He gave me the date. It was 3 weeks after Mia and Nathan had flown in for Christmas, the last Christmas before my father died. The one where my mother had pulled me aside to say she was worried about my finances and offered very kindly to hold on to some of my account login information in case of emergency. I had said no, I had said I was fine. I had not imagined she would go looking for another way in. I thanked Mr. Prentice and told him I'd be in touch. I stood in the parking lot for a moment. The Louisville sky in early April does this thing, where it goes completely flat and grey and indifferent, like it's deciding whether to commit to rain. I looked up at it for a few seconds. Then I went back inside. I found my mother near the photo display, wrapping up a conversation. I waited until there was a break, then said, "Can I talk to you for a minute?" She followed me to a quiet corner near the coat rack. I told her what I'd found, the transfer, the device log, the date. I said it plainly without raising my voice because I had already decided I didn't need to. She was quiet for a moment. Then she adjusted the strap of her purse and said, "You always told us that money wasn't the most important thing to you. We just took you at your word." I looked at her. "Did Dad know about the will change?" I asked. She didn't answer that. "Did he know about the account?" I said. She tilted her head slightly. "Your father trusted me to handle things, the same way you always trusted me. That's what family does." I nodded once. "I want you to enjoy the rest of the reception," I said. "I'll take care of everything else." She touched my arm with the faint warmth she reserved for people she liked slightly less than she let on. "You always do," she said and walked away. I went to an empty table near the back, sat down and opened my phone. Over the next 20 minutes, I built the email, bank screenshots, the security log with the device name, the dates of the $14,800 wire transfer and every transaction I could document from the estate expenses account. A summary of the attorney's call, including the date the will was amended. I'd had the forethought, 9 days ago, to forward myself copies of every vendor contract I'd signed, every receipt, every email confirmation. Not because I expected to need them, but because I was the kind of person who kept records of work no one was going to thank me for. I attached all of it. The email went to Mr. Prentice. It went to Aunt Gail, my father's sister, who was still in the hall saying her goodbyes. It went to two of my father's closest friends from his army days, both of whom had attended the service that morning. And it went to Nathan's parents, Mia's in-laws, who'd flown in from Phoenix and were sitting near the dessert table finishing their coffee. I pressed send. I watched the room. It took about 40 seconds. Then the quiet ripple moved through the space, the particular hush of people reading something unexpected on their phones mid-conversation, a head tilting down, a brow pulling together, a hand reaching to touch a spouse's arm. Mia's mother-in-law said something to her husband, low enough that I couldn't hear it, and he looked up and found me across the room. Mia came to me first. She was still holding her cup. Her expression was something I hadn't seen on her face before. Not anger exactly, but a stunned disorientation, like she'd walked into a room and found everything rearranged. "You sent that to everyone?" she said. "Mr. Prentice needed the documentation," I said. "Everyone else was already seed." She stared at me. "Gemma." "I handled the flowers," I said. "The program, the caterer, the death certificates, the hotel block, the military honors. I wired $1,400 to $800 into an account that I'm now having to document as potentially fraudulent. The attorney found out today that Dad's will was changed without my knowledge. I think that covers enough for 1 week." She opened her mouth, then she didn't say anything. My mother appeared at Mia's shoulder a moment later, reading the room the way she always read rooms, quick, precise, calibrated. She looked at me, and for the first time all day, the calm expression she'd worn like a second outfit showed a crack. Not much, just enough to see that she was calculating. "You've made your point," she said quietly. "I'm not making a point," I said. "I'm making a record." I picked up my bag, said goodbye to Aunt Gail, thanked two of my father's friends for coming, and walked out through the side door into the flat April afternoon. The drive home took 11 minutes. My apartment was quiet and smelled like the candle I'd left burning that morning. I sat at my kitchen table, the same one where I'd been at 1:52 a.m. the night before, proofreading my father's life, and I opened my laptop. At 6:14 p.m, I was removed from the family group chat. No message, no explanation, just erased, the way you remove something you'd rather not look at anymore. I didn't feel what I'd expected to feel. I thought I would feel like a door had closed. Instead, I felt like I'd finally opened one myself. Over the following week, things moved in the order I'd set in motion. The bank confirmed the unauthorized account access within 4 days. The security investigation found 2 additional transfers I hadn't caught, dating back 8 weeks. $700 across 2 earlier transactions. The full amount was returned to my account within 7 business days. The $14,800 wire to the estate expenses account was opened as a separate matter, pending the probate review. Mr. Prentice filed a formal notice of will contest. He told me the caregiver clause contained language inconsistent with my father's other estate documents and showed signs of being inserted late in the drafting process. He was cautiously optimistic. I took that to mean it would be a long road that might still lead somewhere real. Aunt Gail called on the 5th day. She's the quiet one, my father's older sister, the woman who had spent 40 years watching from the edges of family gatherings with the patience of someone who had decided certain things weren't worth arguing about, but were always worth remembering. She said she'd seen the email. She said she was sorry it had come to this. Then she said something I hadn't expected. Your dad talked about you, she said, more than you probably know. He used to say you were the one who held things together without ever asking for credit. He was proud of that. He was also worried about it. I didn't say anything for a moment. He loved you both, she added, but he saw you clearly. I want you to know that. I sat with that for a long time after we hung up. I'm still sitting with it. On the morning of the 8th day, I opened my laptop at the kitchen table. My coffee was hot this time. Sunlight came through the window above the sink, the kind of April light that arrives in Louisville like it means something, because after a long winter it does. I opened my freelance portfolio site and clicked into the About section. There was a line I'd written 3 years ago that I'd always thought was mildly embarrassing in the way honest things sometimes are. Raised in a family that valued showing up. I deleted it. I typed instead, built on her own terms. Then I opened my mortgage lender's portal. I'd been pre-approved for a condo near Crescent Hill earlier in the year. The kind of quiet neighborhood with wide sidewalks and old trees and the feeling that your life actually belongs to you. The approval had lapsed while I was managing the estate logistics. I started the renewal application, just my name, just my income, just my savings account, which had been restored, and whose password I had changed 4 times since April. The legal folder on my desktop had grown to 11 documents. I printed the most recent update from Mr. Prentice's office and slipped it into the paper file I kept in the front pocket of my bag, not because I needed it immediately, because knowing it was there felt like standing on solid ground. My phone buzzed once. An unknown number sent a single text. She told us it was all her idea, we know better now. I saved the number without responding. I had spent years believing that showing up was the same as being seen, that doing the work was its own form of love, and that love eventually found its way back to the people who gave it most carefully. I don't think I believe that as a rule anymore. Some people mistake your reliability for permission. They see your consistency and read it as consent, and they will keep reading it that way until you change the language entirely. My father is still gone. That part doesn't get fixed. Some mornings I still reach for my phone to send him something and feel the absence like something solid and specific right there where he used to be. But I know who organised his funeral. I know who climbed into the attic on her hands and knees at 11 at night to find the 1987 photo. I know who drove the legal pad and the cold coffee and the 1:52 in the morning to make sure everything was exactly right for a man who deserved to be remembered correctly. That part belongs to me whether anyone says so or not. No one can go back in and delete it. I closed the laptop. I pulled my jacket off the hook by the door. Outside, it was the kind of morning that doesn't apologize for how good it feels. Warm enough, green enough, quiet in the way Louisville gets before noon on a weekday. I walked to the coffee shop on the corner, ordered black coffee, sat down at the table by the window. On a napkin, I wrote 3 words and folded it once, not for anyone else, just because I needed to say it somewhere true. I was here. I put it in my pocket and let the morning go on around me, unhurried, fully mine.